Jira, continuing to bring people in and get them involved in pieces of work. If you feel like someone is kind of maybe disengaging, I think that's really important, asking for their opinion. Yeah, and I think daily stand-ups, certain people might not be super inclined to do daily stand-ups, but I think with remote work, they're really, really critical. And just understanding what other communication tools to use and when. I think we'll probably cover that later, but I hope that answers the question.
Well, thank you very much. Serena, you have worked, obviously you mentioned that you've worked with some very large organizations and obviously running your own startup at the moment. Can you share with us how you approach this and what you have observed in the market in terms of career change and sort of professional development in that context?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of frame the question, I did work at Apple and Google for almost a decade in the capacities of product management, and product management and marketing showed up in quite different ways in both of those companies. At Apple, the bridge really was to really link kind of market and consumer insights from a product marketing standpoint to support as well as to guide product development. I was primarily working on the Mac as well as the initial iPhone and iPad products while I was there. And the cross-functional teams there really were kind of bridging between the cross-functional product development teams everywhere from kind of hardware to software, as well as the operating systems, and then certainly all of the marketing channels that Apple has in terms of bringing those products to life. And then at Google, my focus was much more on kind of early technologies. So a lot of my focus there was on go-to-market strategies, really looking at product market fit, and then building out, kind of a marketing and sales strategy to bring products to market. The first team that I was on was Chrome OS. We were just 2 to 3 people at that time. And we really needed to make a case with senior management that, the market did want kind of a more nimble operating system as compared to, Microsoft Windows and the Apple operating system. And, it was really through these experiences that, kind of my approach was much more interdisciplinary. Again, I come from a background that really looks at kind of marketing and product development opportunities through a combined lens of, okay, what do we need to design, support this from an engineering perspective? What is the kind of user experience and user engagement? And certainly, how does this all fit within kind of the business strategy and kind of the go-to-market plan, that the team needs to execute upon. And Guy, in answer to your question, I think some of the biggest shifts that we've seen, within the tech marketplace is that, sure, we certainly still have engineering functions, we still have UI, UX, as well as industrial and hardware designers. We still have, teams that are focused on business and marketing. But all of that is blending together. And I think especially in light of, what is ongoing with COVID, with both the changes in the marketplace as well as how we work together, there is much more of a need as well as expectation that people who are coming in through these functional roles are really able to be adaptable and kind of blend together a much more multidisciplinary approach. And, that is probably one of the biggest trends that I'm seeing in terms of, people who are kind of career upskilling, who are career changing, is they want to be able to work across, a breadth of kind of product development and product management functionalities. But to also just be, again, much more adaptable in their skills. So I'll pause there since the doorbell just rang and let you move on to the next question, Guy.
Well, thank you. And definitely that interdisciplinary aspect is really important. And I can see that a lot with different, sort of founders and individuals that I come across these days because of the importance of that remote capability. Dave, you have been busy working with a range of startups and tech initiatives. I guess one of the most challenging aspects that relates to remote work is tools and process. You mentioned some of that earlier. I guess it's in particular important when you switch on and off, work, not work. What can you share with us about, tools and process, which are part of a large part of the way that we work today from remote?
Yeah, sure. I think it's, so the last 6 months I've been working with people in the agriculture space. So a lot of our team members were former farmers and agronomists. So and then we have obviously our engineers and a team in Berlin. It's just having people from different backgrounds and different kind of technology levels definitely adds an additional challenge into it. But I think if you're working with a product team, I think some of the key things that I've found that works really well is having team meetings when you're about to go remote, and really clearly outlining with everyone, these are the regular times that we're going to be meeting. Maybe we'll do a daily stand up, and maybe we'll do a bi-weekly kind of product review. But just outlining it when everyone's expected to be online and ready for meetings. I think that's really important. And then I think also what I've found to be particularly important is doing, I can't remember what it's called, but basically you fill out what your ideal communication style is. Serena or Guy, feel free to chime in if you know what that might be called. But I did that recently, and that was really helpful. Somebody prefers to get Slack messages rather than a call on Slack or something like that. And I think, being understanding, what people have in their lives. Maybe someone needs to go off to drop their kids at school, or, making sure that everyone's considerate of everyone else's schedules. I think especially during this time is important. So we all have lives, but we also need to work as a team, and we also need to have those times that we can connect together. And then I think just understanding when to have in-person meetings versus, synchronous communication. I think that's also really important. There's a few tools that I've used in the past that have been incredibly helpful. Obviously, Slack is the number one tool that a lot of our teams have used. Zoom for meetings, and then obviously your project management and document management tools, where possible, where you can focus conversations into those tools is really, really helpful because it's contextual, it's all saved. I think Slack is great, but sometimes finding information back in Slack can be difficult at times. So, and then one of the best tools that I've found in the last year and a half is Loom. So loom.com, startup from Silicon Valley. I think they raised $60 million recently. They've made it incredibly easy to create screen sharing. It's when I tell you what it is, that you'll think, why the hell hasn't anyone done it? But they have made it incredibly easy to create really quick videos and share those videos with a URL. So what they did was they actually changed the way that videos are processed, and they moved the meta information so that you can replay the video within seconds rather than wait for 20 minutes. So that's huge. So I use Loom a lot when I'm building out product specs for an engineer. I'll record myself, and I did this more so with my startup, but I'll actually show specifically, what I think should happen. So if we have a prototype, I'll actually go through it. I'll have a Google sheet. I'll remake the database or any equations in the Google sheet so they can get a fuller understanding of what I'm expecting to happen. And that's especially important when you're working with developers who are outsourced. Yeah, and then it's just super valuable. I was working with a team in Berlin, and at the end of the night, when it was like 2 a.m. for them, I would just record a Loom video and say, hey, this is where I'm at with the project. I think we've got to do this, this, and this is the next steps for us. And then the next day, they would send me back a Loom. I would wake up and they'd be like, it's 6 o'clock in Berlin. Here's what's going on, like prototypes at this point. We've got to do X, Y, and Z. So I think Loom is an incredibly valuable tool for continuously having communication. And then another one is World Time Buddy. If you're working with remote teams in different places, World Time Buddy is valuable. And then, design tools already have commenting inbuilt in them. So Figma and Sketch, like I think the ability for product managers to get in there and communicate directly with your designers is so important. And then the last one, which is a new one from, I think it was developed in it was developed on the East Coast of US. It's called Donut. So it's a plugin to Slack, and it automatically will organize virtual coffee chats with your team. So say you're in a newer team, you don't know the engineering team very well, and you don't know the designers very well. It'll just set up automatic coffee chats, which I think is kind of cool. So that's some of the key tools I think are helpful for remote working.
Great, thank you. I guess from what you were saying, a lot of this has to do with engagement because of the notion of working remotely and actually not, as you mentioned earlier, being able to tap someone on the shoulder and ask them how they're going and so on. So I guess it's really that whole aspect of the personal touch, which doesn't exist at the moment, and needs to be overcome by tools. And thanks for sharing those tools with us. I guess just in terms of our audience, we will be sharing both a recording of today, but also names of different products so that if anybody wants to test them and see if they fit for their own sort of experience or sort of working environment, then by all means, they'll have the opportunity to do that. Serena, I guess picking up from there, Impello, your startup, has been working remotely. And while I know that today is not about sales, so it's not, it's more about experiences, it would be great to hear from you about trends or shifts that you've been sort of observing in the market, and to learn about the way, sort of you developed shaping part of this. Either the professional development we spoke about earlier in terms of Impello themselves, or just sort of more broader in the context, obviously, of remote work and COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. And Guy, I would like to kind of share from maybe 2 different perspectives. And again, just by way of background for the audience here, I am a co-founder for Impello. My 2 other co-founders, Bevis is located here, also in the Bay Area, and then our 3rd co-founder and our other key team member are both located over in Melbourne. So certainly a remote team that's working with a 15, 16-hour time difference, which always makes it fun and challenging about when we meet. But, in regards to Impello, we, again, are really a educational strategy company. One of the things that we're really trying to impart with our educational model is what I had kind of shared with my experience, and really what we see kind of as trends in the tech industry and kind of in professional work overall is we are just much, much less siloed into our engineering buckets, into our business strategy buckets. And especially, I think, in this day and age where there is a lot of cross-cultural, cross-functional, kind of cross-technology modalities for work, is how do we, both in the educational and learning experience, kind of provide, right, a much stronger learning experience, kind of around technical skills, but that does also blend in, you know, how do you communicate effectively? How do you prioritize? Or, you know, with a lot of examples that Dave gave, is like, how do you strike a cadence and communication tools that works well for the team and the project that you're on? And also be able to constantly adapt and shift with that. So a large part of the Impello education model is building that right in. Is along with the technical training. Our initial focus has been around software development training. Is also building out, you know, for each of our students, each of our learners, kind of their own interdisciplinary approach. And the fact of, you know, how do they, in honing their technical skills, really connect that back with industry. From the perspective of, you know, what is the marketplace product or service that they're developing for? When you're working on a team, how do you communicate and work effectively with, you know, fellow engineers or people who are in other cross-functional disciplines? And another important part that we really bring into our Impello model is, again, helping each learner, right, being able to ground back in terms of, you know, what their own values, goals, and motivations are. And I think in a time where there's been a lot of disruption and a lot of uncertainties, right, in terms of kind of the tech and professional market in general, it's even more important as individuals, right, to be able to kind of navigate those changes and what that means kind of personally and professionally to us. You know, so at a high level, that's really what Impello is about, is really building out a model that combines the technical training with kind of professional and soft skill development, and ultimately making sure that that is kind of in line with what your personal kind of goals and values are. And quickly, I would also like to just speak from the perspective of, even as a team, half kind of being based here in the US, half being based in Australia, you know, what that has meant, you know, for kind of our product and even our work style. And, you know, one thing that I think we have most been affected by is understanding that some of the constraints, you know, that COVID has placed, you know, where, you know, from an education perspective, we cannot have in-person classroom learning. You know, there's a significant difference in terms of how students get to work with each other, or how students get to engage with the facilitators of our programs. And, you know, in large part, you know, how we've pivoted with that is to look at the same goals, the goals that, you know, I just outlined in terms of kind of the professional, personal development, and kind of ties with industry, and looking at how we can best exercise that in either a blended or an online format. So it's really recognizing that, you know, how to build community, how to really kind of engage and, you know, support those learning processes, you know, is different in terms of delivery and in terms of the types of platforms that we use. So it's been interesting. We are still learning. And like I said, I think one of the biggest parts about being really nimble in product management is kind of keeping the vision, development of product and service that you're building, but understanding, right, the parameters, the players are constantly changing, and how do you kind of keep the balance between those two?
Okay, thank you. I guess, and that's interesting, the context of what we were talking about earlier in terms of how you bring those communities together, because I think that we see that a theme of engagement and a theme of community and a theme of building that sort of holistic environment where you have the ability to work whilst you're doing that in a remote context is something that we'll see more and more being, I guess, addressed over time. So there's going to be a lot of change management that's going to be implemented across the spectrum. And I think that the next sort of question, Dave, is really sort of very relevant to that sort of aspect. So engaging with users is a challenging in the best of times. I guess, what trends have you seen being implemented by startups and scale-ups to help overcome their remoteness and social distancing impacts? And have you sort of seen any changes created, sort of new opportunities to pivot or to continue? Is there anything that you can share with us in that sense?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's, it's
a big question.
It's a big question. I mean, there's so many different industries. I mean, I'm advising a startup in the health and fitness area right now, so online training, and I have another friend who has a startup in that area, and there's so many gyms going out of business, and brick and mortar stores are really struggling. Restaurants are struggling, whereas, yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously a really difficult, that's a tough question to answer. I think that there are some things that companies can do to adapt. I mean, everyone here is, I'm assuming, managing software products, but I think everyone needs to think with empathy as they're moving forward, both with their product decisions and their marketing decisions on empathizing with your target market and understanding what they're going through. A lot of people are experiencing a lot of hardship. So I think companies that do well will shift their product efforts towards helping people. I mean, the best businesses in the world, they're obviously solving problems and helping people. So I think whatever you're doing, thinking with empathy and how can you kind of solve problems in this new world for customers is really important. That's at a very high level answer. It's a super difficult one to answer. I think tactically, because you can't get out there and you can't go see your customers, you can't speak to them, I think video has never, I've always been a fan of video in marketing, but I think video is incredibly important now. There's a lot of platforms you can use to personalize videos. So obviously Loom, I mentioned one before. A lot of companies are using that for marketing now. Send a personalized sales outreach video, or reply to a customer success video. You can use Wistia Soapbox as another tool that I've used in the past. I mean, I think that being more personalized with video will really help your company and stand out. And I think customer success is incredibly important, I guess, all the time, not just in this situation. I had one point I wanted to mention before. I forgot to mention it, but I think working in teams, and now that everyone's remote, it's such a, you don't get the water cooler conversations. You don't get the, oh, how was your weekend? Where did you do that? It's a lot harder to get those types of conversations. So, I mean, it's just, those conversations need to happen, because that's how teams start to build. And, I have a cat and the cat might walk across my screen. It's like such a good leveling, everyone's got it, so yeah, everyone is dealing with the same thing. So I think that's really important, that, when you're working in a team, that, hey, we're all going through this together. I think that's really important.
So just making sure your cat doesn't go behind your back in his underwear.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. Serena, did you have any thoughts about that? Sort of in the content, have you sort of seen anything? I know that you sort of, I saw that you had some thoughts, I think.
Yeah, and I am also watching to see if my cat is running by, because I actually do have a kitty. So that's a real life scenario that Dave kind of highlighted there. I just want to echo what Dave said is, and also kind of express that in a different way in regards to kind of product management and how we can be effective during these times is I feel one of the kind of the most effective parts of being a product manager, again, is being adaptable, and in Dave's word, right, is always connecting back with the customer and the market. And I think in the last decade to 2 decades, right, there has been such a strong drive, right, around design strategy, around human-centered design. And all of these kind of methodologies and approaches really are that. In some ways, you can almost say that it's common sense, right? We're designing products and services for who else but our end customers. And I think in this time, of COVID, again, whether it's hardships, opportunities, kind of changes in the work environment, school environments, family environments that, our customers as product managers are experiencing, it's even more critical to really go back and ask questions. In terms of the product and services that, that we're creating, is it still applicable? Are there other priorities or hardships that our customers are experiencing, which we really need to adapt for, right, in terms of our product strategies and product development roadmaps? And again, kind of bringing that back to our experience with Impello, we recently launched an 8-week pilot program. Again, it was based around the pillars of software development, and again, kind of bringing in professional and personal development as well, again, really tying that to kind of personal goals and values. And we had 10 participants for our beta test. And we had gone in, right, with kind of a product strategy and what we were designing for. COVID hit, and again, kind of the way that we were able to engage with our learners and really kind of bring forth our educational model did certainly shift. Obviously with COVID, there are a lot of people who want to reskill, who want to go back to school, but there are also financial constraints and considerations that come with that. And as we went through the beta, our learnings were really, really multifaceted. We certainly learned in terms of our students' engagement with the product, but I would say some of our broader learnings were really kind of given kind of the shifts that we're seeing in industry and the job market, in the software development sector, is how can we actually better serve, right, our learners and kind of stay true to our educational model. And that really brought us to ask a lot of questions, right, in terms of the product and service that we're developing. And it's actually caused us to kind of pivot and kind of go back, if you want to say, into that kind of questioning and research stage, just so that we can, again, contextualize, right, for our learners and customers, where they're coming from, kind of what their goals are, what their challenges are, and really kind of shifting our product strategy to meet that as that continually changes.
So that's really interesting. So thank you for adding to that. And I guess the next question sort of really would resonate with you, I think, well, in that sort of area. From your own experience as a product developer today and previously, but in particular these days, are you aware of any dynamics, or should we be aware of any dynamics when working cross-culture, cross-functional, with cross-culture or cross-functional teams? Is there anything that you can share with us, Serena?
Yes. And that is hard to say fast, cross-cultural, cross-functional. So yeah, I think the biggest learning I've had, even in my own professional experience, again, referencing working back at Apple, on any given day, on every given week, on any given product, I would be working with, hardcore engineers, system designers, hardware designers, and, turn around and be working with our web producers, right? How's this product going to appear on our website, come live and be on sale at apple.com. And, I would say kind of my learning and really the approach that I brought to it again was just being really holistic. For me, I really kind of viewed myself as kind of being the keeper or the vision of a product, say the launch of the first MacBook Air. And really the dynamic I would try to seed in the teams that I worked on was, again, helping and tying these cross-functional teams to what the larger vision of the product was. Again, with the example of the initial launch with MacBook Air, we were bringing to market a new class of notebook computers. It was meant to be thinner, lighter. We certainly had done a lot of innovation from the industrial design standpoint around the MacBook Air. And we really were meeting customer need of customers who are just traveling all the time, right? They don't want something that's heavy or big in terms of being able to travel and being nimble in terms of their work. And to just kind of highlight the question that you asked, what I did was really to just kind of blur those lines in between teams. When we were, from a marketing perspective, really building out the innovation story around the design of the enclosure of the MacBook Air. We were utilizing some new manufacturing processes, actually had a few key people from our creative team go into the industrial design lab. We looked at the various steps in which were taken both in design as well as in manufacturing of the new MacBook Air enclosure. And that really kind of blended in kind of like a marketing perspective with what was really happening on a deep engineering and design perspective. And conversely, once we launched the product in market, we went out. At Apple, we certainly did do market research. We went out, we looked at individuals as well as corporations who had bought the MacBook Air and observed. Again, it was kind of that design strategy perspective. How are people using this product? How does it fit in their life? How does it get shared with families and communities? And in that case, I would always grab one or two engineers. Oftentimes they were kicking and screaming, and bring them out into the field with me. And really have them understand kind of the broader context in which they were designing and developing products for. So just in summary, an answer to your question, Guy, I think the biggest dynamic to kind of really consider when working with cross-functional teams is, again, as a product manager, how do you really seed that vision across your team of the product and service that you're bringing to market? And how do you help, those on your team be able to see kind of cross-functionally or cross-disciplinary, different perspectives in terms of kind of the product development and launch?
And I think, thanks, Serena. And I think the biggest challenge in that context will be everything that we've spoken until now as it relates to the remote work, but actually still sort of tying together into the experience that you want to deliver both to your team in terms of the development of your product, but also into your customer and the users. Because one of the biggest challenges will be about that observation, because suddenly now you have to do it, a lot of it from remote. And obviously that will be something that was going to be a whole new paradigm of thinking and a shift in the way that we, I guess, continue and doing continuous improvement. So it'll be really interesting to observe the next, 6 to 12 months and see that sort of transition takes place, because a lot of us at the moment are still sort of finding our ways in doing it. And it's going to be, I guess, very pivotal in the way that we may be approaching that sort of, I guess, part of the journey in the products compared to what we have done previously. So thank you for that. Dave, any thoughts on that in terms of cross-culture or cross-functional teams that you sort of in a more sort of small, startup-y?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I just enjoyed hearing that story about Apple. So, I think, I mean, what really resonates with me is, I guess, and we just conducted 2 weeks of interviews with farmers over Zoom, which was pretty difficult, to be honest, given some of them weren't super computer literate, but it is possible. And I think one of the things that Serena mentioned about the lines were kind of blurred between the marketing and the product. And I think Apple especially does an incredibly good job of that. But I think that the way that I see the role of the product manager is taking in and trying to synthesize all of the customer needs and then also understanding what can be done from the engineering and design side and trying to bring it all together. And that sometimes is pretty difficult. And I think being remote is going to be even more difficult to do. And at the end of the day, communication is everything. I've found, I've been lucky to speak to really talented designers and just sit down with them. And I mean, this is something I try and do to understand how they work and what are the things that are important to them and how do they think. Because the more that as product managers we can understand that, the better that we can communicate with them.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So we've weaved some of the questions into this part, and I guess if anybody that's online at the moment has any questions, we'll be delighted if you could pop them into the Q&A. There were a few, and we sort of tried to address them throughout. So we'll give a minute or two if anybody wants to pop any final questions. Okay. So look, everyone, thank you very much. Thank you for the panelists for sharing their thoughts on these topics. Obviously, anybody that's joined us today can feel more than comfortable to both reach out to us, on LinkedIn, and we'll be delighted to share more. We will be socializing some content from today, just so that people will have a point of reference going forward. And there will be a recording, as we said. Any other topics that will be of interest, we'd be delighted to hear from you. Otherwise, thank you very much to everyone who joined us today, and we look forward to hearing from you and continuing sharing in the future. Hope you enjoyed the weekend. See ya. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Take care.
One moment.
Yeah, okay. I was just waiting for the last one to